Hi everyone and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul and today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview of this motherboard from Gigabyte. This is the Gigabyte F2A85X-UP4. This is a standard ATX form factor motherboard. It features the FM2 socket, which is designed for AMD's A-series APUs. And APUs is an accelerated processing unit. Basically, it's a CPU and a GPU on the same chip. Now, bear in mind there's socket FM1 as well. They are not intercompatible or backwards compatible. So if you go with this motherboard, make sure you get a Trinity FM2 AMD APU to go along with it. It also features the A85X chipset, and then UP4 means a few different things. For instance, Ultra Durable 5 construction, so that's their 5th generation of UD series construction for temperature, efficiency, and performance. We also have an award right here, Best of Computex 2012. Gigabyte has hit up IR, or International Rectifier, which also happens to be, well, it was my superhero code name, but I guess now I'm going to have to figure out something else. But they're using IR Power Stage IR3550 MOSFETs to help deliver power. Those are 60 amp rated power stages. So again, more efficiency and excellent thermal management. Keeping those cooler will allow you to overclock, because again, this is designed for overclocking on the AMD APU platform. And it's also designed for A-series APUs and water-cooled systems. So if you're interested in water cooling, this might be a motherboard that you want to check out. Also Windows 8 ready by way of the 3D UEFI BIOS. You can actually configure Windows 8 to boot very, very quickly. You also get digital power delivery, as mentioned, the 3D BIOS, so a graphical representation of your BIOS to help you navigate around. You also have the advanced mode you can jump back to if you're not into the 3D BIOS. You have the option to do either. Double the copper in the PCB for the construction, again here part of the Ultra Durable series, and a glass fabric PCB design for humidity protection. Here on the back we have some more details on some of the stuff I already mentioned on the front, but for instance some details about those IR Power Stage IR3550 MOSFETs, which are again helping deliver power to the CPU as well as the APU. You can see sort of a little representation there of the digital power delivery to the two main power zones of the CPU and the GPU. A little bit of a comparison here: hot, cooler, and of course coolest. And then of course your overclock is going to fail if you're not using high quality components. You do get Virtue MVP, so that can help you virtualize your GPU and more easily switch back and forth between the GPU that's part of your APU, or if you also can install an add-on discrete graphics card, you can help manage that and switch between the two. Also down here at the bottom we have some more logos pointing out a few more different things. If you get an AMD APU, you can actually have triple monitor support right out of the box. DirectX 11 is also supported. You get a DisplayPort connector. This board does support two-way Crossfire X if you want to go with a higher end discrete graphics card configuration. All solid Japanese capacitors are used. You get some on-off functionality for charging with the USB ports, so they will always be on even if your computer is off, and you can charge your devices such as a smartphone or a tablet. 2560 by 1600 resolution is supported out of the dual link DVI connector. That's again if you're going to be using the GPU that's part of your AMD APU. And of course you also have AMD dual graphics technology. That's an option. I'd recommend checking out the AMD dual graphics chart that they have on their website to determine if that's a good option for you, because depending on the APU you go with, there are different GPUs that might be compatible. So I recommend checking that out to see if that's a good option for you, or if not, you can also of course just do a discrete GPU if you're going for some higher level graphics functionality in the computer that you're building. Finally, over here on the left side we have a specification chart, so you guys can take a closer look at that if you want to. Inside the box we have some documentation and accessories. I will peruse these for your edification. Alright, oh look, two multilingual installation guidebooks. Aha, this is Asian and this is European. So Gigabyte is making sure that whatever language might happen to be native to you, you should be able to go through their installation book to get your system up and running. Here's the English user's manual. Let me just give a quick look at this. So we have, for instance, well, table of contents. We have a layout of the motherboard itself. We have a block diagram, so you can tell what's connected to what. For instance, which devices are running directly from your AMD APU, and then some others are controlled by the A85X chipset. We also have, of course, detailed specs for all the components on the board, so you can take a closer look at that if you want to. And then some installation instructions that will walk you through your build. You can also check out our Newegg TV How to Build a Computer series if you want some more help with that. Here is your driver and utility DVD. Chances are you will have updated versions of all these drivers and utilities available directly from Gigabyte's website. So check that out and download those. They'll be newer than this and give you some better compatibility. But of course, keep that on hand, especially if you need to load your NIC or network card driver. Here's a Gigabyte case badge if you want to put that on your case, if you're into case badges. Here's your input-output shield. It's black and they are color-coded so you can tell more easily which connectors are which. You'll notice, of course, you have some USB 3 connectivity as well as some eSATA. We'll get into that when I talk about the I/O on the motherboard itself. On the back we have the squishy sort of feel to that, which I really like because it helps prevent you cutting yourself. I don't know if you've ever cut yourself on an I/O shield. This also provides some electromagnetic shielding. Finally here, serial ATA connectors. Serial ATA cables. A total of 6 of these. You get 3 that have straight plugs on both sides, and then you get 3 that have a straight plug on one side and a 90-degree angled plug on the other side. These are all going to be SATA revision 1, 2, and 3 compatible, so you can use these if you're going to be connecting, say, for instance, a high-performance SSD, and they have the little metal clasps on the end to help hold them in place. Here's a closer look at the F2A85X-UP4 motherboard itself. Again, standard ATX form factor, so this should fit in the majority of standard ATX form factor computer cases that are out there. As far as the color scheme on the board, you have a nice flat black PCB in the back that has a nice clean look to it. For the color scheme, we have black components for the most part, as well as some gray scattered throughout, for instance, the Gigabyte heat sinks here and here, as well as some of the Dimm slots, and of course some of the components on the board, such as the power delivery components. Let me point out the fan headers on the board. You do get one CPU fan header, which is right here, 4-pin PWM CPU fan header, and then 4 system fan headers for case fans that are also 4 pins. So one here in the top left, 2 which are right here next to the main motherboard power connector, so one right above and one just to the lower left, and then a 4th which is down here in the lower right next to the front panel connectors. Also, just a quick flip around here to the back for a closer look at that nice flat black PCB. And for the A85X chipset heatsink right here, you have 2 Phillips head spring-loaded screws if you do need to remove that at any point. And then for the heatsink on the power delivery, you got a couple plastic push pins, also removable, just not quite as easy as those Phillips head screws. Next, we're going to take a detailed look at the motherboard. We're starting off down here in the bottom right, and first off we have this multicolored group of pinouts right there. Those are your front panel connectors. You get a little chart underneath that will point out which one is which. You can also reference the motherboard manual to tell which of those is which, but the color coding does help out. You have a SATA port right there, and this is actually one of the total of 8 SATA revision 3 6 gigabit per second ports that are on the board. One is right here, 6 are further up. We're going to come to those, and then you get one via an eSATA port in the back. And this is one of the awesome features of the A85X chipset right there, is these are all natively controlled by the chipset, and they're all SATA Rev 3 6 gigabit per second compatible. So if you want to put a slew of SSDs and connect them to this motherboard, you can, and they can be natively controlled. Another feature right over here is this Debug LED, and that's a really handy feature to have on a motherboard, especially if you're just going through initial system configuration and post. If you have any issues, you can reference the LED readout right there, double check the code in the motherboard manual. It'll give you a much better idea of where the problem might be occurring to help you go through some troubleshooting and get yourself up and running. You also have a clear CMOS, couple pinouts right there, so you can just use a jumper on that to manually clear your CMOS. You also have a button higher up on the board that I'll point out to you that might be a little bit easier to use. There's one of your additional one of your additional system fan connectors right there. Again, all of those are 4-pin PWM capable. Here's some USB 2.0 headers. So you'll notice the red background on this one here. This means it's one of the always-on USB 2.0 connectors, so that will maintain power even while the system is off. So I frequently recommend routing your front panel USB 2.0 if you have one of those to this one, and that way you can easily plug in a smartphone or a tablet, for example, to charge on the front of your computer. 3 more USB 2.0 ports right there. Again, one of the awesome features of the A85X chipset. All of these USB 2.0 are controlled by the chipset. Next up, you have a Tpm header. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Tpm Trusted Platform Module. If you're into that sort of thing, you can connect that up. You also have a COM header just to the left of that, right there. SPDIF pinout, as well as front panel audio connector, so you can route that over for some front panel headphone and microphone jacks. Moving up the side of the board, we have some of the audio componentry installed right there. You will notice the little Realtek logo on that chip right there. That is for the Realtek ALC892 codec chipset that will support 2, 4, 5.1, and 7.1 channel audio out. Next, let's talk about PCI slots, because we have a nice variety of them. So let's start with the X1s, the shorter ones right here. PCI Express X1, you get 3 of those. You also have a legacy PCI slot right here. And then finally you have the full-length X16 PCI Express slots, and you'll notice you have 3 of those. Now this board does support two-way Crossfire X, and if you're going to be setting that up, you'd want to go with the top slot here and then this slot here. This one's actually wired up fully for PCI Express X16. This one is wired for PCI Express X8. You'll notice that the little pins inside that slot terminate right about there, and the rest are empty. However, of course, that's still plenty of bandwidth for a discrete video card. So again, Crossfire X, you want to use these 2 slots. Finally, down here at the bottom, you have another full-length PCI Express slot. This one is wired up for X4, so that's a great spot for an add-on card, maybe a TV tuner or a RAID controller, something like that. And then, of course, that PCI slot is a legacy port, but if you have an older PCI device, you can plug it in right there. Also want to point out that the 2 slots for Crossfire X do have triple slot spacing, so it will support, for instance, a triple slot video card, or if you go with a 2-slot video card, you'll have an extra gap here in between for some additional airflow, or it will give you access to that 1X PCI Express slot. Okay, moving on a little bit further to the right, over here we have a Gigabyte logoed chipset heatsink. Nice gray color on that one. You'll notice over here the dual BIOS, so there's your 2 BIOS chips. Again, you can use that for BIOS recovery if you have any error during an update, for example, or you can set up a couple different configurations on either one so you can switch back and forth. MBIOS is the main one, BBIOS is the backup. Now, I already pointed out the serial ATA port, which is down here at the bottom. You get 3 more side-facing serial ATA ports right there. Again, these are all SATA Rev 3, 6 gigabit per second compatible. They'll all handle your SSDs just fine, as well as any other devices such as mechanical hard drives and optical disk drives. And again, all those are controlled by the chipset. And you also get some RAID functionality. Let me double check that. You can do RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10, or JBOD, which is just a bunch of disks. Next up, we'll move up the side. So we have a USB 3.0 front panel header right there, so 20 pin. If you have a newer case with USB 3.0 on the front, you can connect that right there. Moving up the side here, we have our main 24 pin motherboard power connector. There's the 2 system fan headers that I pointed out to you guys at the beginning of this overview. And then further up the side here, we have some nice little bonus features. For instance, we have a reset button right there, that little blue one. We have that other clear CMOS button, so you can use that to reset the UEFI to factory defaults. Then we have a nice big red surface-mounted power switch, so particularly if you're doing an outside-of-the-box build, you can push that button to turn your system on and off. Next up, we have our DDR3 DIMM slots, so you'll notice there's a total of 4 there. These are dual channel capable, so I would recommend purchasing your DDR3 DIMMs in sets of 2 and installing them in the paired slots to make sure you get the added bandwidth that dual channel DDR3 gives you the capability of having. 1.5 volt DDR3 DIMMs are recommended. This will actually support up to 64 gigs. That means you can do 16 gig DIMMs in each slot. Now, I personally have not really seen 16 gig DIMMs outside of the server market right now, but last year I was saying that about 8 gig DIMMs, and now they're actually pretty common. So eventually, when these are a little bit more common and the DDR3 density continues to improve, you can actually get a lot of memory installed on this motherboard. Moving to the left, we have our FM2 socket, and again, this is going to support FM2 APUs from AMD only. Remember, bear in mind, FM2 is not backwards compatible with FM1, so make sure you get an FM2 Trinity APU to install right there. And again, it's going to have both a CPU and a GPU integrated right there. You can, of course, just bypass the integrated GPU if you want to use discrete graphics, or you can use the video outs over here and not even have an installed graphics card. So it gives you a nice bit of flexibility there. You'll also notice, since this board is designed for overclocking, you have some really nice chokes as well as other power delivery components. You have a nice heat sink here that's going to be on top of those power stage power delivery components underneath it to keep those nice and cool. Again, particularly if you're going to be doing overclocking, keeping these components cool is very key. And I'd recommend, especially if you're going to be going with water cooling, that you make sure you have some additional airflow over this area just to make sure you evacuate that heat. Finally, you have your 8-pin supplemental CPU power connector there in the top left, and make sure you plug that in. Otherwise, chances are your system's not going to boot. Or if it is, you're not going to get the performance that you're expecting. All right, on the rear I/O here, we have a combo PS2 port there for a mouse or a keyboard. You have 4 more USB 3.0 ports here, so this will give you 4 here on the rear I/O. You also have, again, that header I pointed to you on the other side of the board, so that will give you a total of 6 USB 3.0 ports that are available. And I should mention that there's an e-tron chip that is controlling 2 of these. I'm actually not 100% positive which one. Let's see if I can figure it out. E-tron. Oh, okay, now I know. The e-tron is going to be these over here, because over here you have the ones that are wired up to the chipset. You also notice they've given you a nice sticker. For USB mouse or keyboard, sometimes, especially if you're just initially getting your system set up, sometimes not all the ports before they have drivers installed are going to be recognizing that properly. So they've put a sticker here to indicate plug your mouse and keyboard into those USB 2.0 ports so you have compatibility right out of the box, and especially to make sure that you can control your UEFI right out of the gate. Okay. We have video connectors, of course. Let me remove the protective caps on those. Again, if you have an AMD APU installed over there, you can do your video outs right there. They'll be controlled by that AMD APU. It does support Eyefinity out of the box. Bear in mind that the VGA here and the display port here are going to be sharing bandwidth. So if you're going to go with if you do want to do triple display via the APU, you need a combination that does not use both of those. So for instance, you can do DVI, VGA, and HDMI. You can do HDMI, DisplayPort, and DVI, which I think would be the best configuration because those are all digital. But again, various configurations for that. Just make sure you're not planning on using both the VGA and a DisplayPort. You also have an optical toslink connector right there for optical audio out. Again, you have a 8th serial ATA connector right there via the eSATA port down there at the bottom. Again, that's going to be SATA revision 3, 6 gigabit per second compatible. You have a gigabit Ethernet connector right there, and that is provided by Realtek. Then finally you have all your analog audio connectors here, so microphone of course, and then all the other connectors for your 7.1 channel audio out. And that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, this has been the GIGABYTE F2A85X-UP4 motherboard featuring the A85X chipset and the FM2 socket for AMD Trinity APUs. I'm Paul with Newegg TV, and if you enjoyed today's video, you can find more on our Newegg YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you all next time on Newegg TV.